You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories about God speaking and his people having just enough faith to believe him and obey. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 3, Episode 11. Hey guys, and welcome to Feathers this week. I'm so glad that you're here. For those that might have missed it on last week's episode, the Feathers app is in the iTunes store. So just search for Feathers, Faith in Flight, or just even Feathers, and you just have to scroll down a little bit. And you will be able to get the app. And the app has a listing of all of the episodes. You can listen, favorite, share the episodes. It makes it super easy to get to on your phone. For those of you who have a Droid, that version is coming soon. So really excited to get that out to you guys as well. All right, this week we have Courtney Stanford, and I love this story because she is a listener of the Feathers podcast and emailed me and said she had a story and that she would love to share it. And of course, I was very happy to accommodate her. Guys, if you have a story in your life that you would love to share, where you have, your faith is in flight, where you have been able to hear the call of God and to obey, I would love to share that. You don't have to have a blog. You don't even have to have a Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You don't have to have anything. I just love to hear the stories, and I know the people listening do too. So please email me, amyjbennett@gmail.com. I would love to hear it. And if you know of anybody in your life that has a story that you think that listeners would love to hear, please email me. I would love to hear it and be able to share what God has done in people's lives. Anyway, so Courtney has a story like that where she was asked and really felt led by God to go on a missions trip. And she had very young kids and didn't think that she wanted to leave them and go. And it was to Haiti, so that was kind of scary in itself. So anyway, she's going to share that story today and see all that God did through that. So let's go ahead and get started with Courtney Stanford. Courtney, welcome to Feathers today.
Thanks, Amy. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited that you're here. Let's start off with you introducing yourself, your family, and all that good stuff.
Sure. My name is Courtney Stanford. I am a blogger. I blog at CourtneyStanford.com. My blog is called Let Every Heart. I am married to my husband, Brett, who I met in college. We were college sweethearts. He is a worship pastor at our church and also a full-time music teacher. We have 3 little boys who are 2, 5, and 6. So I occasionally lovingly refer to our house as a frat house. I am kind of a girly girl mom of 3 rough and tumble little boys. So this whole motherhood adventure has been much different than what I anticipated, but we are just loving every minute of it right now as they're growing. And in addition to blogging, I'm also an active part of our women's ministry at church, and I teach an adult Sunday school class called All Walks with Jesus. And so those things together keep us pretty busy right now in this season of life.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I love that you guys were college sweethearts. My husband and I were high school sweethearts.
Oh, neat.
So I'm just interested. You got 3 boys.
I do.
So did you have siblings? Were they boys?
Yes, I have a little brother, and I do not have any sisters. And so, I kind of feel like I missed the boat with the girl thing because I don't have any girls and I don't have a sister. But I have such a close relationship with my brother, who's 3 years younger than me. And I think that was probably God's way of preparing me to kind of have interest in some boy things, even though, really, I guess a tolerance for the boy things is what I really have. Really, right. I have very few interest in the typical quote-unquote boy things because I just love girl stuff through and through. But having a younger brother, I have, I guess, grown accustomed to their way of doing things. I guess I should say it was good preparation for being a boy mom.
Yeah, I love the way you say that. Their way of doing things.
Yeah, right. Their way of doing things.
That's awesome. So actually, we're going to talk a little bit about your kids tonight and the story that you have of actually leaving them for a short amount of time and the struggle that you had with that, actually going on a short-term missions trip short-term missions trip
Right.
to Haiti. So I would love for us to jump into that and you kind of just share really from the beginning of how this all came about.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, I guess to be clear, I should start by saying that I do not at all have a love for adventure, but I have a huge love for people and more so for Jesus. So I guess before I even get started, I should say that this has been such a God thing from the get go, that the Haiti experience for me has been very relationship based because I would not have done this by my own choosing. This has been a God thing from the very start. So, my husband and I have talked for years about doing international missions, and it was always one of those, I'm going to do that someday kind of things. And I remember my mom and I have talked about, I remember signing up at a youth conference when I was in the eighth grade that I felt a call to do missions. But then I didn't really ever do much about that ever again. Um, Now, I believe, of course, that as followers of Jesus, we are missional wherever we are. And so whether that's in my neighborhood or when I was a classroom teacher in my classroom or to my children in my home, I believe God's called me to be missional in all of those places. But international missions, I hadn't done much with. And I had grown very accustomed to doing what was safe. I'm a safety first kind of girl. I'm a little bit of a control freak, that kind of thing. And I like my rules and safety guidelines and those sorts of things. I'm just a little tightly wound in that way, or at least I was. I was before this came up. So my husband and I had talked a little bit about we feel like we're going to start doing international missions soon. And this is a few years back. So one night, I guess one of our good friends had talked to him in church about, hey, we're going to get a team together. And this good friend's this is actually one of Brett's friends, and I'm friends with his wife as well. And one of our friends' moms, the man who came to talk to me, his mom and dad are missionaries in Haiti. And so he had come to me that night, and we were standing outside my husband's choir room, and he said, Courtney, Brett said you might be interested in going to Haiti this summer. And I said, oh, I don't know about that. I remember I immediately began like sweating profusely, like, oh, I'm not really sure about that. I'm not really sure why Brett told you that. And I said, did he say he would go too? And he said, well, no, he just said he thought it was something you would be interested in. And I said, well, I would. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about the safety involved. So I'm going to need an itinerary, and I'm going to need a plan, and I'm going to need all these things, because I'm kind of a structured person. And so I said, I'd have to think about this. Who else is going? And, I just demanded, I need all the details about this. And this friend we're talking to is a very laid back person. Like we always joke, never knows where his cell phone is. Totally the opposite of me, and said, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I can give you all the details. And I said, well, I don't really know if I can go. So fast forward a little bit. I didn't talk much about this to anyone outside of my husband for a while. And my pastor was doing a sermon. I guess to rewind a little bit, this particular Sunday morning, I did talk to the Sunday school class that I teach. And I said, I'm really praying about something. I'm praying about possibly going on an international mission trip to Haiti. And they were all like, oh, wow, are you scared? And I was like, I don't know. And then the questions began with, but what about your children? I started hearing that a lot, And so this particular morning, I had.
So what? I'm sorry. How old were your kids at this time?
At this time, my children were not yet. When I left for Haiti, they were 1, 4, and 3. And so at this time, when I was deciding whether or not I would go, they were not quite 1. They were 1, 3, and 5 when I went. So they were not quite 1. Our middle guy was 3, and my oldest guy was not quite yet 5. So they were little.
So babies and preschoolers.
Right,
That's
exactly.
hard.
Babies and preschoolers at this point. So I kind of mentioned it to my Sunday school class, and they said, oh, we'll be praying about this. And I guess the only other people I had really talked to about it were some family members of mine who had with my church, just some aunts and uncles, strangely enough, with a small group of people that had from my church gone on this particular mission trip. Two of my aunts and one of my uncles had gone to Haiti before. And so we had kind of talked about it a little bit the Easter before this particular sermon that my pastor did. So anyway, my pastor knew nothing of this. And I remember my grandma saying to me, "You're not really going to go, are you?" When she overheard us talking about it. And I said, "I don't know. I'm praying about it." And everyone was like, "What about your kids? What would they think?" Because they were little. So fast forward back to this Sunday morning, my pastor was doing a sermon, and I was listening like I always do. And um, I just I remember specifically my heart tuning in when he said, "You don't have to have an itinerary. You don't
Mm.
have to know the plan. When God calls you, sometimes you just get in the boat." And I turned around, and our friend who was leading the trip, who had come and talked to me about it, and I said, "Oh, I really need an itinerary," was working the sound for my husband in our sound booth. And I turned around, and the people in my Sunday school class, um, my couple of aunts and my uncle who go to my church, my friend's wife who had already signed up to go on the trip, everyone was looking at me, just kind of, and everyone was kind of laughing
Don't you love
about it. I
that
do.
when don't you love that when you're in a sermon, you're like
Yes.
wanting to like elbow
I
somebody because you
know.
know it's for
Yes.
them. You're like, that's for you.
Yes, but this one
Yeah.
was absolutely for me, but yet my pastor had no idea. The Holy Spirit was
Hmm.
just speaking through him at this point, I truly believe. And so afterwards, everyone came to me and said, "Courtney, get in the boat. You've got to do this. Get in the boat." And I said, "Okay, okay, I'll get in the boat." Um, and we decided that day that I was going to sign up. But even after that, I still had such reservations because I just felt like if I followed Jesus in this radical way, in a way that isn't really typical for moms of little bitty guys to do, I just had this guilt that was a little bit coming from others, but mostly coming from myself, that I would just be such a negligent mom, just, and this was an 8-day trip we're talking about, short-term mission trip. So I realize that's a little irrational, but I was really struggling with guilt at that point. So we went to one of our favorite little places that we go to. It's a little, we call it the Amish store at our house. It's a little shop run by a really sweet Mennonite family. And it's kind of a mercantile sort of shop. And you can get sandwiches and that sort of thing. And our oldest son absolutely loves it. And so we had one Saturday, shortly after I had sort of halfway committed to go to Haiti, we had gone to the Amish store for lunch that day. And I had prayed that morning, "God, if you would just, I'm sorry to ask, Lord, but if you'll just give me some sort of a sign, I just need a real sign. Something that will tell me, yes, Courtney, I want you to do this, because God, I'm afraid that maybe just I want to do this. I'm afraid that maybe I was really struggling with the fact that I had always been known as someone who was safe. I was afraid that maybe I just wanted to be brave,
Mm.
and I was so afraid of wanting to be brave. Yet my husband was constantly telling me, "Courtney, you don't want to be brave. You don't. You've never been bothered. That you're kind of defined by being cautious and safety conscientious and conservative in that way, and it never really had bothered me." And he kept saying, "I'm telling you, I really think this is God." And he was encouraging me, and I was so blessed that he was so supportive. But anyway, I had prayed that morning, "God, just please give me some sort of a sign." And I felt terrible to do that because usually I feel like I should step out in faith, like more of a
Hmm.
blind faith. But I was like, "God, if you'll just put the writing on the wall," and I was so just needing to see something that would say, "This is you, this is not me." And I was just afraid for my safety and, for my children's, all these silly things that I feel silly about now that I've fallen in love with Haiti. But anyway, we went to that Amish store, and there are all of these beautiful decorative things in this shop, and it's the nicest little place. We love to get sandwiches and go out and sit on their patio, and you can eat them there. And so we were all in line getting our sandwiches, and we filled out the little paper, and the nice Mennonite boy who makes the sandwiches was making this for us. So I was kind of over by my children, and they were looking at these little toy tractors. And as I turned around, there was a sign, a literal sign, on the wall when I turned around that said, "The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua 1:9. I thought,
Mm.
well, Lord, that is a sign. I didn't mean I needed a real sign, you know? And so we kind of joke sometimes when we go in there. I'll say, "Oh, there's my sign. It's still there." And I keep thinking maybe one of these days, like my husband will like buy that sign from me or something. I don't know. I guess he'll listen to this later and be like, "Oh, that's why she always points out the sign." Anyway, but
There's your hint.
yeah, there's your hint. There's your hint, husband. But anyway, it was standing there and it said, it was hanging and it said, "The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And I nudged my husband and I said, "I prayed this morning for a sign. And he said, and there's your sign. I mean, it was a real, it was just a funny thing. Ann Voskamp had been talking on her blog earlier in the week, her blog, A Holy Experience, that I absolutely love. And at that point, I wasn't blogging yet. I was just faithfully reading blogs when I'd lay my preschoolers and my baby down for nap. And she had been talking about, I don't remember specifically what, but I read it faithfully every day. And she said in a blog post that week, when you leave your comfort zone, the comforter goes with you. And I remember she had mentioned Joshua 1:9. And so I turned around and saw Joshua 1:9 and I thought, okay, I can do this. And so I signed up and the rest is history. I am completely, just absolutely in love with the Haitian people and just what I've seen God doing in Haiti and the ministry that I've been able to kind of come alongside with a couple times now that I know I will continue to work with in the future. But anyway, that was kind of my story of deciding to get in the boat. And those are kind of things that we just look back at now and we see God at work in my stubborn little heart,
Yeah, and I love too, and I think this is so much like God, is that there was just little, like almost breadcrumbs along the way where he just kept confirming it from all different places, whether I find it too, what bloggers are writing about or what my preacher is talking about, just like you said, a sign.
Absolutely.
A sign in the store. It's like it all sort of, it always just reminds me of sort of a tapestry, it kind of you pull the strings all together and it's creating this story.
Yeah,
so.
And it has been just so affirming because I know, and sometimes I love Haiti so much in such a way that I never expected that, and I've made some good friends there, and I'm committed to going back. And I sometimes forget, and I look back and I think, oh, God did put this in my heart, because sometimes I love it so much that I think, is this just something I love? Is this just something I want to do? Because I have this passion, but the Bible talks about God giving us the desires of our heart. And I don't think that means, I think you and I know, Amy, as Christians, that doesn't mean that we're going to have everything we want. Absolutely not. We know that is not what that scripture means. But I do know that God goes ahead of us and that God shapes our hearts sometimes for what it is he wants us to do, for his will and his purpose. And so the desire of my heart was something that he put there, that the Holy Spirit planted, that over time, I've gotten to see this come to fruition now.
So I'm just so interested. Tell us about the actual trip. Like, what made you fall in love with Haiti? I'm just so curious.
So I think it's important for me to say that as we were planning to go, my children got so on board with it. And my two older ones, I mean, my baby, obviously, he was a year old. And we still have this picture that my husband took on the day I left of me holding our little 1-year-old. And, I think that guilt was never completely gone. But I remember one time after a meeting that we had to plan the Haiti trip, I had come home and my little boy my oldest son wanted to know all about it. And he was 4, almost 5 at that time. And he is a follower of Jesus now. But at the time, of course, he was just little. And this was a few years back. And he was just a little guy. But he has a heart of gold. And he said, Mommy, maybe if you teach me some more things about Jesus, then I can teach other people about Jesus. And I thought, thank you so much, Lord, because that was God's affirmation. It was just a gift to my heart as a mommy that my children would be just fine, even if I followed Jesus in this way that felt radical as a mom of 3 little guys. That my children would learn from my example that it doesn't always look like doing what we feel like we should be doing, what others expect us to be doing. Sometimes following Jesus looks like doing what Jesus has called us to do. And it may feel different than what we think the American dream looks like, or what we feel like our roles are. And so anyway, I really felt like I had great support from my husband and my children leaving. And I remember my husband saying to me, if anyone asks you how we're going to do, you tell them that I am supporting you 110% in this. If anybody says, oh, your poor husband has to take care of those babies by himself for a whole week, you say, my husband is so happy for me to do this. And so I just left with that support. But the day that we left, our praise team sang a song by Josh Wilson, Pushing Back the Dark. And because I was still a little fearful in my own heart of the unknown. And so the lyrics were, whatever you do, don't look back. Someone needs the light you have. You might know that song. Do you know that one, Amy?
I don't think I
Oh,
do.
I
I
love it.
the title sounds really
Yeah.
familiar, but I'm not super familiar with like the lyrics or
Yes.
anything.
So anyway, our praise team sang that as kind of our Haiti send off, and we left shortly after that for the airport. And so we were walking through the airport, and I just kept thinking, okay, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. You're going to do this, because as moms of little ones, we just feel like we sometimes feel like our first place is to be in our home, and that is where we should be. And yes, that is so true, but I was still just wrestling with this, that there was anything else I could do for 8 days. I was just so wrestling with that. So I kept thinking, put one foot in front of the other, just keep going. And whatever you do, don't look back. Someone needs the light you have, like I just kept thinking, if someone can see the love of Jesus in me, my children know they are loved. And so we went on to Haiti, and my husband had said to me, I wish I could see your face when you first see their faces. And I've written a blog post on that on my blog. I actually have a series of blog posts called Where My Trust Is Without Borders, where I talk about from the song Oceans, of course, which is my very,
Hmm.
very favorite by Hillsong. I'm sure you know that one.
Hmm.
But anyway, I have a blog post called When You First See Their Faces, because my husband had said, I just wish I could see you when you first see the faces of those little children, because I've always loved children, and I'm an elementary school teacher on hiatus right now while I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I love our babies, and I love, plenty of other people's children as well. So anyway, that's just my vocation is elementary and early childhood education. And so we first got to Haiti, we arrived, and one of the first things we did was just a little sightseeing on the way to the compound where we were going. It was a 3-hour ride from the airport to where we were going. And so um, along the way, we did a tiny bit of sightseeing. And in one place, I remember the children coming up over a hill where I was standing, and they were wearing these red uniforms. And I can still remember seeing their teacher. And I thought, this is the moment. This is the moment where I'm first seeing the faces of the Haitian people up close. This is no longer an advertisement for Compassion International, and those
Hmm.
organizations that I've loved for so long. And my aunts were going along on this trip, and they had said to me, Courtney, it is so much different than the slideshows you see and the pictures you see when you are in it. It is so much different because it just, people of a different nationality, people of a different culture became real to me outside of my little world, and my little American world that I knew. I was getting to see firsthand other people who were also the creation of God, and we just need that sometimes. We just need to, in whatever way, get out of our comfort zone. And so it was really time for me from where I was in my comfortable Christianity to be out of my comfort zone. So that is a huge part of my story. But anyway, um, I got to know once we were there, we kind of began some working and some there was going to be some music things, and we were going to invite them to a concert. And I learned how to speak a little Haitian Creole from the get go, and I was really working on just getting to know them and getting to know their language from the get go while I got there. But I started building friendships with people that I never, ever, ever expected. And one of the first ones I met was a man who was some might call him a beggar. And I guess really that's what he would have been had it not been for the missionaries um, who live and work at the compound year round. So I want to make it clear that this short term mission trip that I'm talking about is a very sustainable kind of missions organization, because the organization I was there to help host different short term groups all year long. Um, when weather is best. I mean, there's a season that they don't, because it gets so hot that they don't invite people at that point and they take care of things themselves. But anyway, so they have projects ongoing that are good for them to plug in short term mission teams too, if you know what I'm saying. But it's not like you show up, you do the thing, you leave, and no one has contact with these people. They have
Right.
ongoing relationships with these people. So one of the first people I met was Ifwa. And Mr. Ifwa would be a beggar if not for the missionaries who live at Project Help Haiti full time. And he was sitting on He only had one leg, and he wasn't able to work for a living, and he was sitting on a sidewalk outside the home of some missionaries that I have a local connection to, who I've known most of my life, and he was sitting outside of their Haiti home, as we call it. They have another home in my community, and um, someone introduced me to him and said, "Oh, this is Ifwa. He's very nice. You should get to hear him sing sometime." And so we said hello and we kind of went on our way. And so I think it was the next morning when I was awake kind of early and he was outside. And I guess I should set this up by saying the reason he's not a beggar is because they allowed him to do some yard work. And he would carry around his machete and he would sit and sing and hum and cut down weeds. And they would give him food every day because he couldn't work for his living. And so that was a way for him to have a job. They called him an employee, and that provided him with dignity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that next morning I got up and he was, we were getting ready for the tasks of the day, and I was up a little early and ready to go. And some of my team members were still getting ready. And Ifwa was sitting there working on his weeds for the day and kind of humming to himself. So I had asked someone what the Haitian Creole word for sing was, and I learned that it was chante. And so I had gone to him that morning and I said, "Chante, Ifwa?" And he said, "Oui." And I said, "Okay." So I sat down and he started singing, "There is a Fountain." Mm-hmm. And it was just he was singing it in Creole, and I am not fluent in Creole. I've gotten much, much better at it. And I know a lot of phrases, so I can kind of communicate now. And my Haitian friends will say, "Oh, you know Creole, and no, I don't. I'm just learning phrases to help me communicate here." But anyway, I sat down beside him and he started to sing, and he was only a few measures in before I realized it was a song I knew. And so I started to sing along in English, and he drew quite a crowd singing this. Some other women came up and sat and he sang for a while. And one of the funniest memories I had was I said, I had been asking him previously if he would sing, and he kept saying pizza. And Ifwa had a very raspy, he was getting very, very, very old at that point. He was a very elderly man. And this was a couple years back. And his voice was very raspy, and I thought he was saying pizza. And I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know where I can find any pizza." I was so naive. "I don't know, but I'll be on the lookout. I'll try, maybe, and I'm really like motioning, and I'll come back with pizza if I can. I'll try, So the missionaries told me later, "No, Courtney, he's saying pita. That means later," So anyway, I had gone back a few times, and so I asked him if he would sing, and he started singing for us. And when we walked away, I said, to another lady who was with me, I said, "I think that it is one of the most special moments of my whole life. I don't think I will ever, ever forget that." Yet I had no idea at that point the role he would play in my life. I got to know him very well. As well as you can in 8 days, but I got to know him very well that trip. And he one day started talking to me, and I would listen to him sing, and someone had told me, "You should ask him to sing. His favorite song is Trust and Obey." And so I had asked him to sing Trust and Obey, which is another part of, you talked about how it was kind of a tapestry. I felt like that was another part of me seeing God's affirmation in this, that trust and obey was one of his, I had to kind of step out in faith and do something that I felt like was just not the normal mom thing for a mom of 3 kids. And I felt like when he was singing Trust and Obey for the first time, I felt like, "God, this is just you saying once again, yes, this is good. This is where you're supposed to be right now." Because to be honest, I've never really known, and I still can't really tell you what the purpose in me going to Haiti is, and people say things like, "Oh, maybe it's as much to change you as it is to change them." And I don't know. I don't want to say that we use short-term missions as a way to change our hearts. But certainly I can't deny that my life has been changed. I can't deny that my heart has been changed, So he began to sing that day. And when he was done singing Trust and Obey, he started talking to me. And I had no idea what he was saying because he was talking so fast. And we had a way that I will never really understand except for that God was in it. We had a way of kind of understanding each other up till that point, and since then, I've been able to communicate with him well. But that particular day, I had no idea what he was saying, and so I looked around the compound, and there was another boy nearby, another Haitian boy nearby, and I said, "Hey, you," and he said, "Me," and I said, "Yeah, come over here," and so he came over, and kind of a teen boy, and I remember he had on these funny white sunglasses, like great big white sunglasses. And I said, "Do you speak Haitian Creole?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you speak English?" Because some of them speak French. And he said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm from," and he told us where he was from. And so I guess French was a big language for him, but he was able to speak enough Creole and also English to translate for us. So he went on to say that Ifwa was saying, I said, "Can you understand what he's saying?" And he said, "He's saying if your brother needs help, it is good to help your brother." And so Ifwa said, "We," and he would start to say something else, and I would say, "What is he saying now?" And he would say, "He is saying if your brother needs help, it is good to help your brother." And so I would say, "Okay, so what's he saying now?" Because he would continue and he'd say, "He just keeps saying the same thing. It is good to help your brother. You should help your brother. And I said, "That's right, Ifwa. The Bible tells us that." And he translated back, "It is good for us to help one another." And I learned that one way to communicate with Ifwa was he loved when we would bring him snacks. He had enough sufficient food. He had meals, and the missionaries took excellent care of him, and he even had some snacks. But he would love it if we would stop by and give him, in both of the years that I was there with him, he loved it if we would stop by and give him a little bit of beef jerky, or, like one of our Slim Jims or one of our granola bars. And so we just really built a strong relationship through, even though we don't speak the same language, through singing, through the sharing of snacks. And, I just felt like it was a glimpse of what God's kingdom is to me on a grander scale, of the breaking of bread together and the sharing and the fellowshipping together. And I just felt like, God, this is a lot like what heaven is going to be like. I'm getting a glimpse. And last year, when I went, we took a lady named Donna with us, and she learned how to say many, many things very fluently in Haitian Creole. And one that she learned to say was the scripture in Revelation about how one day it'll be a beautiful thing when the different nationalities and races and tribes and cultures all can speak the same language, and we can worship God together. And every time she would say that scripture verse, and I can't remember the specific reference right now, but every time she would say that, they would get so excited. I took a picture of one lady that we've made friends with, like praising God while she threw her hands up in the air as Donna was telling her that, and she praised God because that was the portrait of that's really, I think, what I see most in Haiti as we're forming these relationships with people. We can't really speak the same language, but when we're worshiping God alongside each other, we know, and there are translators, and we do make sure we can say some things before we go. And like I said, there are the American missionaries that are there year round. So there are lots of ways that those communication gaps are filled, but it's been such a blessing to see that. And I've met other good friends. I have a good friend, Claudie, who's a teacher, and I could tell you funny stories about Claudie. She, just a fast one, she said, "You must go to me and you must climb up the back stairs," meaning the back stairs of the compound, "and look over the bridge, and there is my house, and you will say to me, 'Yoo-hoo, Claudie,' and I will say, 'Here I am, here's Claudie, yoo-hoo.'" And so she told me that both years, and it cracked me up. And she said last year it was such a blessing to me when I went, and she said, "Oh, my Courtney." And she said, "Betty gave you to me." Well, Betty is the missionary who is from my community, but also works year round there, except for they have months where they switch off and on, where they come home for a season. But anyway, she is a full-time employee of the compound there. And so anyway, she said, "Betty gave you to me." And she hugged me, and that meant the world to me. I never will truly know what exactly she meant, but I knew that she meant she had introduced us to each other and that we formed this friendship. And she wanted us to visit her house. And she pulled out all these chairs. This was just last year. She pulled out all of these chairs for my team, and she had exactly 12 chairs, and there were 12 of us there that day. And she said, "Oh, perfect." And she kept saying, you come to House Claudie. This is House Claudie. And she was so proud of her house. And when we form those relationships with them, um, it's just so important that when we're in someone else's culture, that we give dignity to their story and their culture and their home and outside of our little world and my little Christian culture that I've grown up with, my American Christianity. There is so much more in this kingdom of God that I feel like my eyes have been open to now, and that not everyone has the same. Their walk with Jesus looks a little bit different than my walk with Jesus, and they rely on Him and in a different way than we have to. You know what I'm saying, Amy? They have everyone in Haiti, either, and I can really truly say probably everyone, for the most part, relies on Jesus or they rely on voodoo. Those two things are very prominent because they rely on those things. And Claudie sat and talked to me about it and cried with me a little bit about it because, or to me a little bit about it because she has friends who are so caught up in the voodoo culture there. They rely on something. In America, we might put our hope in our jobs or our checking accounts or our careers or our 401ks or whatever those things are, that we fall back on. They, in their culture, rely on Jesus or something else of the spiritual world, which is not of Jesus. And so the lukewarm Christianity I have not experienced in Haiti. To me, from my brief experiences, it doesn't exist, is what I would tell you. That it doesn't exist because their idolatry doesn't look like ours at all. In America, the idolatry is in these other things that we feel like we can fall back on. And maybe we turn to Jesus when things are hard. And sometimes I think in the past few years, my husband and I have done a lot more with missions, and I'm learning a lot more. And, just from reading Jen Hatmaker books and Kisses for Katie Davis, and all of those things that I'm sure you're very familiar with, I'm learning and growing more and learning more about loving people outside of my own culture, and one thing I've seen is that when I've worshiped alongside them is that they just don't hold back in their worship to Jesus. They aren't relying on something else, if you know what I'm saying. So I had a really neat thing happen when I returned from Haiti. And what happened was a friend of mine was looking at, I put a little album of Facebook of my Haiti trip, like we do, and had shared some pictures. These were some people I got to know well as we were working alongside them, because this ministry works alongside the Haitian people, the people who live in the community, so that they're not taking away from their work. And they're just coming alongside them and giving them skills to support their families or just helping them to complete different tasks they're doing. And so never taking work away from them, And so I don't know if you've read When Helping Hurts, but that is...
I haven't. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't read it. I know yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I came back and I had put a Facebook album up, and a friend of mine who I didn't really know well at the time, now our children are good friends, but at the time I didn't know her very well, messaged me and said, "Hey, I think my husband has painted a picture of one of the men in your pictures." And I was like, "Really? I don't think so." And she was like, "Yes, this man." And she sent me his picture, like she texted me a screenshot, and I was like, "Yes, you have a painting of him?" Like how random. I was like, "That's my friend Ifwa," and who I had grown to be such a good friend with while I was there, and he had grown to be so special to me. And she said, "Yeah, I think my husband Zach painted him." And she was like, "Somebody from your church, when they had gone before, had shown my husband this picture, and it was such a neat picture that he had painted him. And we have this picture hanging in our house. And so I was like,
Wow. So she has Ifwa on her
yeah,
wall.
so she had Ifwa on her wall. I was like, wow,
That's
that's
crazy.
really, really random, you know? And so I was like, wow, that's really neat. Oh my goodness. And I never thought anything about it ever again. I just thought it was so neat, you know? And so um, the trip had been in June. So the following year, around Christmas, that Christmas, my heart ached because I saw our materialism in a different way. I knew that Christmas in Haiti looked a little different. I knew that it was probably in some ways a little more pure in Haiti. I knew that in some ways it was maybe a little more about Jesus and a little bit less about what we make it sometimes in our culture. And my heart was with them as Christmas morning came around. It was all I could think about. And someone had posted, one of the missionaries there had posted maybe Christmas Eve morning or maybe Christmas Eve night, sometime within that 24 hours, had posted, "This is my little Christmas gift to you all. Here's Ifwa singing." And she had posted on Facebook. She was in Haiti with him at that time, and she had posted him singing for Christmas and sent it and said, "This is my little Christmas card." And I said, "Oh, Bim's her name." I said, "Nothing in the world would have meant more to me today than this." And so, you know, I was really just, my children are opening presents, and I could think of very little else except for my friends in Haiti, who I had met this past summer. And my husband said, "We have one more present." And he went to the car and he came back and, oh, I remember there was one other thing that had happened. I almost left out this important part. I had bought a print in Haiti, a little painting, and Brett had framed it and given it to me for Christmas. And so I thought, there is nothing that could be better. You know, this is the ultimate Christmas present. And so he had framed that picture for me and he had taken my picture with it. And I turned around and was doing that like almost in a real time Instagram thing. And I was posting it. And this is Christmas morning. My kids were done with their presents. And I was posting, nothing could be better than this picture that my husband had framed for me that I bought in Haiti. Nothing could be better than this. And so my kids were playing with their toys, and I was Instagramming that. My husband said, "Oh, I have one more thing." And so I was like, "All right, you know." And so I'm putting that on Facebook or on Instagram, Facebooking that picture that he had framed for me. And as I looked up, my husband and my two oldest boys had come in, and they were holding the great big picture that our friend had painted of Ifwa, and my husband had bought it for me for
Aww.
Christmas. And so I am a very, very seldomly do I cry. I burst into tears. And my next Instagram picture said something like, "Never mind, this is the best present I could have ever
This is
had.
the best.
This is the number one." And so, anyway, Ifwa now hangs on our wall. And
Oh, he's on your
yeah,
walls.
he's on my wall now in my hallway with what we call our Haiti wall. And hanging right beside the words to the songs from Oceans that my in-laws got for me that Christmas, that include the words, "Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders." And that hangs beside Ifwa, and also that other print that I thought was going to be the ultimate, the painting I'd had, or he had framed that I had bought in Haiti. And so we have a little Haiti wall there, along with now we have a child nearby that we sponsor. We don't have a child. There's a child who lives in Haiti that we sponsor through Compassion International, and his picture hangs on the wall also. But anyway, that was just so special to me. And I had really gone back and forth once I knew I was going back to Haiti for the following year after I'd gotten the painting. My friends and I joked. I said, "Oh, Ifah would think it was so crazy. Like, can you imagine if we found out someone else had a picture of us, like a painting of us hanging on their wall?" Like, I could probably just never tell him that. He would think that was so crazy, you know? And so I went back and I thought, oh, he probably won't even remember me. And to this day, I will never know for sure if he really did. But when I first got into Haiti, the first day he wasn't there. And so the next day, I woke up and I walked outside the guest house, and he was sitting on the bench outside. He was doing his yard work and sitting there and cutting his weeds with his machete and humming to himself. And I walked outside and I said, Ifwa. And he opened his arms, great big, to me. And so I ran up and I gave him a hug. And I didn't really think he remembered me, but I pulled up a picture of us the year before in Haiti together. And I said, you remember? And he said, we. And he nodded and he insisted. I mean, if he didn't really remember, he sure pretended, you know. And a
Yeah.
missionary friend of ours who lives there said, oh, he does. He doesn't, Ifwa doesn't forget anyone. He remembers you. So I will never really know, but it seemed to me that he really did. And so we're having this good conversation. And we were talking about just the different, I don't remember specifically what we were talking about, but he had sung a little bit. And we were talking about the different things that he had been up to, you know, and the things of the year past. And remember, he's a much elderly man, but the conversation was going just really well. And I thought, I'm going to tell him about this. While my phone's out and I've already shown him this picture, I'm going to tell him he might really like this painting. And so I just felt like God was saying, yes, go ahead and show him. And so I pulled out my phone and I said, Ifwa, look. And I showed him the picture of me on Christmas morning holding the painting, and he immediately knew it was him. He got so excited. He started yelling to his friend, a younger man, not elderly, probably in his 50s or 60s. He started yelling, Ed, to another guy who works on the compound there and earns his living there. And Ed ran over and he said, Ed, and he was pointing to show Ed. And so, you know, in these stories, I can never remember exactly what he said and what maybe I just understood by the grace of God. But anyway, he wanted me to show Ed this picture. And so I showed Ed, and he was showing Ed the picture, and he was so proud, and I was so glad that I showed it to him. And in our last visit, we had one little fun day at the end where there's like a little resort you can go to, and I always feel badly about that. Like, this is a mission trip. We should be really like, you know, we should be in the heat, and we shouldn't be going on our fun day. We should be working hard, and they always remind me, the missionaries who live there, Courtney, this is a good thing. This provides people with jobs. You know, this resort that they have going, when Americans come and visit, or when the very wealthy people of Haiti, because there are some, believe it or not, when the wealthy Haitians visit, that provides those people with jobs for their families. It's okay for us to take our last day and go to the resort. And so anyway, that's just an inner struggle of mine. I guess that's silly. But anyway, we went that day, and as we were coming back, I realized that it was time for the compound to be closing, and that those who had jobs there, the Haitian people, would be going home for the day. And I realized, you know, and like I said, Ifwa is very elderly, and I don't know, you know, how many times I don't know for certain how many times I will get to go back to Haiti. So every time, you know, when you say goodbye to someone, it could be the last time you see them. And so I realized, okay, we're getting really close to the time that they're going to send them home. And I said to one of the missionaries, Mila, what time are they going to be going home? And she said, oh, Courtney, they're going to go home any second. And so someone said, I said, oh, I'm not going to get to say goodbye to Ifwa before we leave in the morning. I didn't say goodbye to him. And someone said, well, there he goes. And he was hobbling on his crutches. Mind you, he walks an hour. Not an hour, I'm sorry, a mile. He walks a mile every day on his crutches back and forth to the compound, to his home. And so in all kinds of weather, because he'll be fed when he's there. You know what I'm saying? And so it's part of his commitment is that he will go every day. And so he's hobbling back on his crutches slowly, but going back toward the road. And so I said, okay, everyone, we can stop right here. And I jumped out, and they were pretty far down the gravel road at this point. And I ran back toward the gate and said, Ifwa, and he stopped, and we talked for a few minutes. Another team member, a friend of mine, had followed me. And from the resort that day, I'd gotten a Diet Coke. And you know, Coke had the campaign going on that said, share Coke with. And my can said, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Ifwa asked if he could have a drink of my Diet Coke. And I thought, well, I mean, usually I don't really share drinks. I guess I could just give him the rest. I mean, you know, it's just like a funny moment when someone says, you know, can I have a drink of your Diet Coke, you know? And so those weren't his exact words, but he was asking if he could have a drink of mine. And so I handed it over, and as I did, it said, share Coke with your sweetie. So we took a picture of the two of us in the Coke can, share Coke with your sweetie. And it's not a great picture of me, but it's a good memory nonetheless, because it's the last picture we have. And it's kind of a funny little friendship because, he's an elderly Haitian man, and I'm a, I'm in my 30s, and here I am. And so anyway, it's just kind of a funny little friendship. But anyway, we have this picture of us, and it's not a great one of me. I had just gotten back from the water park, and I have very naturally curly hair, but it's so special to me. And I was glad that I had this conversation with him, because the last thing we said both years, the last thing I had said both years, and someone was there to translate both times, was I had said, will you tell him if I don't see him again, I'll see him in heaven one day. And so if I don't see him again, I'll see him in heaven one day. And because he had told me many times before he loved Jesus, yes, I love Jesus. And my last trip, he had asked me actually to read the Bible to him. And so we'd shared in some of these special times. And I said, will you tell him that if I don't see him again, I will see him in heaven? And so the translator said that. I say translator, it's just another, person, another citizen who lives there. But anyway, had said that to him, and said, I heard him say, in paradise. And he said, paradise, yes, And so we hugged and we went on our way. And I got a phone call early one morning. I woke up this fall, and someone called to tell me that Ifwa had passed away this year. And, but this friend said to me, you'll always have that picture on your wall. You have that painting you've shared. Aren't you so glad you've shared in these memories and you got to know him? And, it was really special to me that, in this most unlikely friendship, the people around me really started to see just the relationships that I was forming with the people in Haiti, and that this isn't a trip. This isn't just people in other cultures are not photo opportunities for us. They are not, this isn't something that we go and do so that we can feel better, because my own neighbors need to know about Jesus too, and so I have other places in my life where I need to be missional as well. This is just a place that God has called me to in this season of my life, which seems like a strange season of my life to some, but this is a season of my life that God has allowed me to be a part of Haiti, and I will not necessarily ever know why on this side of heaven, but that day that Ifwa passed away, so many people called me that day or sent me text messages, different team members. I'm praying for you today. I know that he was a special person to you. But, I had that assurance that he had a great relationship with Jesus, and this is someone I'm going to see again. And what an awesome thing that we have in the kingdom of God to know that, there's suffering on this side of heaven, and his life, Ifwa's life, looks very, very, very different from the life that I have, or the life my children have, or our friends. And his life had a kind of suffering that I will never know. But at the same time, his joy was in Jesus. And that's what we share, with all the followers of Christ. And so this is not our end. This home is not our end. And so it was really special to me to be able to share in that.
Well, I love that. Just thinking back to the beginning when you were just so scared to even go and just hear the joy and you talking about this and your passion and your love for those people. I mean, you may not be able to pick a specific reason, but I can definitely hear where God has worked and changed you and just given you a love for those people. And it sounds like it's lifelong. It's not just a single thing. So, that's just awesome to see.
Yes. The first time I came back and we kind of did our report for the church to tell about, thank you for praying for us while we were gone. This is what we experienced. This is what we did. This is how we saw God at work. Kind of give the typical short-term mission report. The first time we came back, I remember I ended my very long spiel to our church with, I'll tell you when I write a book about it. I will write a book about this one day, and I'll tell you when the book is out. And they kind of laughed. This year, I ended my report with telling them, this is more than a trip to me now. This is a relationship. This has become very relational for me, and I don't know where God's going to lead in this, or what God's plan is, or what his purpose is for this, but I know it's not a trip anymore.
Yeah, and that's the really cool thing, is that this is still an in-process journey. right? So this was just
Absolutely.
the first step, but
It
you had to
was.
get in the boat.
Right.
You had to get in the boat
Exactly.
to take the journey.
I had to get
So
in the
I
boat.
love that. Well, thanks so much for sharing, Courtney.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Thank you for having me on today.
Yep. So if people want to, you mentioned a couple of blog posts, I'll link them in the show notes. But if people
Sure.
want to connect with you online, what's your website and how can people best? I know some people have favorite social media.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Which ones are your favorites?
Oh, my favorites. Okay. I really love a few different social media. So I'll tell you, my blog is www.courtneystanford.com. And that's where they can read the entire story of Haiti. My experiences there, so many more that I was able to share today and in my decision to go and all sorts of things. It's the series is called Where My Trust Is Without Borders. And I write about other things, about missional living, where we are, about motherhood, about raising little boys, marriage, just different things that God is teaching me, and especially a lot about community among women and friendships. And just encouraging, I write to encourage women in all seasons of life. I call my blog Let Every Heart. So we're preparing him room in every season, kind of a spin-off of the song Joy to the World, which is my absolute favorite Christmas hymn. So anyway, you can find me on Twitter at the handle Court Stanford. And on Instagram at Court_Stanford. I'm Court Stanford on Twitter and Court_Stanford on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I hope people connect with you there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amy. Have a wonderful day.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Courtney. You can see how she is so passionate about her time in Haiti and all that God showed her, and the confidence that he gave her, the courage he gave her, and really the relationships that she has now built with these people, and what a gift that is. There are a couple things that I am really taking away from this conversation with Courtney, and the first is just how God weaves together confirmation and things that he wants us to do, whether it is, a song, or whether it's a sermon, whether it's a blog post or a sign in a store, all of these things weave together, and God is really speaking to us and just continually getting in front of us and confirming it. And I kind of think of it, I read a book recently that they called Fingerprints of God, where you can see that it's God's fingerprint, and he's leaving behind his fingerprint, and you can kind of see where God is at work. The second thing that I really want to talk about is this guilt that she experienced as a mother. I know that I struggle so much with that and a lot of things that I do with my kids. Well, not with my kids, but just, the fact that I work, the fact that I'm doing this podcast and taking time away from my kids to do that, when I write, just different things that, in my life that I've done ministry-wise especially, and I wonder, is this really where God wants me? Because I'm taking time away from my kids. And I love a couple people who really encourage me in this. One is Natalie Grant. She's a Christian singer, and she talks about it, and she says, she really feels that guilt because she often has to travel to be able to sing. And you look at somebody like Natalie Grant and you think, wow, she's like so successful. You wouldn't even think that she doubts for a second that that's what she's supposed to do. She's clearly talented, and that is what she is meant to do, is share her voice. And yet she still struggles in being away from her kids. And I have felt the same thing too. But she says, actually a video she might still have on her Facebook about how she began to see that God was not just calling her, but she was calling her whole family, and how when she comes back from events, her kids say, how did we do? How did we do? And she gets to say, like, how many people came to the Lord? And it really is a family affair. So I just love that perspective. And also Christine Kane, she talks about, as she travels and ministers to people, that, her children, she loves to see that her children are learning from the other women around her at different conferences and things, and that her children can learn from them. And that's the environment that they're soaking up while they're growing up. And so I love that. Not everybody is called to, things that are, in a public realm or creating anything. But I just think of Courtney and how, what an example she set to be able to do something outside the box, outside the country, and something that made her scared, and how she will be able to say, and how her kids saw her be courageous and walk out in faith. And that is going to be such an example to her children. So I think sometimes we just have to let go of the guilt when God is calling us. And that's not to say that you can just do whatever you want and not think about your kids. But when God is calling us, He is going to work it all together for good. All of it, even your children and their development and their faith in Him. So if God is calling you, don't let that guilt trip you up. It's just a false guilt. And the last thing I just want to encourage you, at the end, she's talking about, you just have to get in the boat. Like, this would have never happened if she didn't finally take that leap and sign up. So at some point in a lot of these cases where God is calling us, is you really just have to get in the boat. At some point, you have to quit thinking about it. You have to quit looking for signs. You have to quit, thinking and worrying. You're just going to have to do it. So maybe some of you guys, maybe a person here that's listening is at the point where you really just need to get in the boat. You need to obey God. Quit arguing with Him, quit giving Him all the reasons why it's not going to work, and just get in the boat. So I hope that encourages you, whatever spot that you are in with your walk with the Lord. So guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was so encouraging to you. You can check all the notes over at featherspodcast.com. Courtney does have a lot of those blog posts that she wrote while she was coming back from her mission trip, and some pictures over there. So we'd love for you to check that out. So guys, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week on Feathers.